I was always the kid who dreamed big but never really knew how to make those dreams happen. Growing up in a small town, there wasn't a lot of room for entrepreneurial thinking. The path was simple: get good grades, go to college, get a job, and live a normal life. But from the age of 16, I knew that wasn't the life I wanted. It wasn't that I didn't like the idea of a steady paycheck or benefits, but I always felt like I could be doing something more. I didn't even know what that something was, but I could feel the potential deep inside of me. The problem was, I had no idea how to go about finding or creating this thing that would drive me. All I had was a deep, unshakable belief that one day I would find it. After high school, I went off to college, not sure about what I wanted to study. I chose business, thinking it was as close as I could get to what I was looking for. I didn't go to a prestigious school, just a regular state university, and to be honest, I wasn't great at academics. I wasn't failing, but I wasn't excelling either. College felt like a means to an end for me, and I still had no clue where it was leading. In my junior year, I met a professor who completely changed my perspective on life. He wasn't your typical business professor. He had started several businesses, failed at a few, and then succeeded in a big way. One day, during office hours, he casually mentioned something that would stay with me forever. Failure is just a stepping stone to success, but only if you're willing to learn from it. At that moment, it was like a switch flipped. I realized that if I wanted to be an entrepreneur, I had to stop thinking of failure as the end of the road and start thinking of it as a lesson. He encouraged me to start small, find a side project, something I could work on while I finished my degree. That's when the idea hit me. I'd always been passionate about fitness, but there were no good, affordable fitness resources for people my age. Everyone around me complained about not having enough time or money to stay in shape. That was my opening. I started with an idea for an app that would make fitness more accessible for busy college students. The concept was simple: a platform that connected students with personal trainers who offered affordable virtual workouts. The idea was to pair fitness experts with a younger audience who were struggling to prioritize health while juggling classes, work, and social life. I was aware that there were other fitness apps out there, but none of them seemed to cater to my demographic. I knew there was potential, but I had no idea how to make it a reality. I spent hours researching, talking to my friends, and even asking professors for advice. A few of them were skeptical, saying that the market was too competitive and the concept was too ambitious. But I didn't care. I wanted to give it a shot. So, I took the plunge. Building the app wasn't easy. I had no technical skills, so I had to hire a developer. The first person I hired turned out to be a complete disaster. He overpromised, underdelivered, and I ended up losing more money than I could afford. That was my first taste of failure. But instead of giving up, I took that experience and used it to refine my approach. I learned how to vet contractors more carefully and manage the project myself. Slowly but surely, I got the app into a working prototype. By the time I graduated, I had a beta version of the app ready to go. But there was still one big issue: I had no users. I needed to find a way to make people care about my app. I started small, reaching out to students on campus, offering free trials and getting feedback. Slowly but surely, the app gained traction. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive, but there was still one major hurdle: money. I didn't have enough funds to take the app to the next level. This is where the real grind started. I applied to every startup accelerator and pitch competition I could find. At first, I got rejected everywhere. But eventually, after months of applications, I was accepted into a local startup incubator. They gave me a small grant and access to mentors who could help me refine the business. That was the turning point. The next few months were a blur of long nights, constant tweaking, and relentless pitching. I learned to navigate the world of investors, handle rejection, and refine my pitch until it was tight. The app kept growing, and I began gaining a loyal user base. I realized that this was no longer just a side project. I was building a real business. The breakthrough came when I landed my first big partnership. A well-known gym chain was interested in offering exclusive virtual training packages through the app. This partnership gave me the credibility I needed, and the influx of new users helped take my startup to the next level. I was finally seeing the fruits of my labor. However, success didn't come without its challenges. The business grew fast, and with growth came a host of new problems. I had to hire a team, manage customer service, and deal with the constant pressure of keeping up with competition. There were days when I felt like everything was falling apart, and I didn't know how to fix it. The stress was overwhelming. But somehow, I kept pushing forward. I reminded myself of the lessons I had learned from failure. Each problem was just another chance to grow. A few years later, the company was thriving. We had expanded beyond college campuses and were offering virtual fitness solutions to people of all ages. Our app had become a household name, and we were generating revenue in the seven figures. We had investors, a strong team, and a clear vision for the future. Looking back, it feels surreal. There were times when I thought about giving up, times when failure seemed inevitable. But in the end, it was the failures that shaped me and the persistence that made all the difference. Today, I still run the company, but I've learned to balance the hustle with taking care of myself. The entrepreneurial journey is never easy, but it's been worth every moment of struggle. I'm living proof that with enough grit, resilience, and a willingness to learn from failure, you can build something from nothing. If there's one thing I'd want to tell anyone reading this, it's that no dream is too big if you're willing to take the first step. The road won't always be smooth, and failure is inevitable, but those bumps in the road are often the greatest teachers. Keep going, even when it feels impossible. You'll get there. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. I started my entrepreneurial journey with just a broken laptop, an old desk, and a ton of ambition. Looking back, it's incredible how far I've come, but at the time, I had no idea where to start. It wasn't glamorous, and it wasn't easy. But somehow, piece by piece, things began to fall into place. I had always been a hustler at heart. From the moment I could earn my first dollar, I was flipping things on eBay, offering odd jobs around the neighborhood, and doing anything I could to make some extra cash. But none of that was building something sustainable. None of it was a real business. And that frustrated me. It all started when I was about 23. I had dropped out of college, mostly because I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, and my mind was constantly buzzing with ideas. My parents were disappointed, of course. They had expected me to follow a more traditional path, get a degree, and climb some corporate ladder. But that wasn't me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was meant for something more. At the time, I was living in a small apartment in the city, barely making ends meet, working a dead-end job as a barista. The pay was low, the hours were long, and I spent my shifts daydreaming about starting my own business. I had no specific plan or even a clear idea of what that business would be. I just knew that I couldn't stay stuck in that life forever. One evening, I was sitting on my bed with my laptop open, mindlessly scrolling through YouTube videos, when I stumbled upon an interview with a successful entrepreneur. He talked about how he built a business from scratch by offering something simple, something people needed, and growing from there. It sounded like common sense, but hearing someone actually talk about it made me feel like it was possible for me too. I remember closing the laptop and thinking, what's the one thing that's missing in my life right now? What's the one thing I would pay for, no questions asked, if I had the money? That's when it hit me. I needed to start a business around something that had a direct impact on people's lives. Something that people would willingly pay for, something practical. I'd been obsessed with fitness for years, ever since I picked up my first set of dumbbells at 16. It wasn't just about working out for me. It was about feeling empowered and capable of anything. I'd been learning as much as I could about nutrition, workouts, and wellness, but there was one major issue I kept coming across. The fitness space was full of confusing, contradictory advice. I didn't understand why there wasn't a place for simple, straightforward, and personalized fitness advice that was easy to access, easy to follow, and didn't feel like you had to be a pro just to get started. That's when I decided to create a fitness app. But not just any fitness app, one that was intuitive, affordable, and focused on real people with real lives. A place where someone could open the app and instantly feel like they could take control of their health, no matter where they were in their journey. The first few months were brutal. I didn't have any tech skills, no idea how to code, and definitely no budget to hire a development team. But I had determination, and I knew I could figure it out. I started learning everything I could about app development. I spent sleepless nights watching YouTube tutorials, reading endless articles, and taking online courses. I learned how to use design software, how to prototype an app, and how to build a business plan. I knew the idea had potential, so I started building my network. I reached out to fitness trainers, nutritionists, and other people in the industry. I spent hours cold emailing and cold calling, trying to get their feedback on my idea. Most of the responses were dismissive, but a few were encouraging. That gave me the confidence to keep moving forward. Eventually, I scraped together enough money to hire a freelance developer. It wasn't much, but I was able to offer him a small retainer in exchange for help getting the basic version of the app off the ground. I worked my full-time job during the day, then came home and spent my nights working on the app, answering emails, and refining my business plan. It was exhausting. Some nights, I would fall asleep with my laptop still open, dreaming of a successful business while the world outside my window slept. After about 6 months of hard work, we finally launched the first version of the app. It was far from perfect, the design was basic, and there were plenty of bugs. But it worked. People could sign up, track their workouts, and follow along with personalized fitness plans. I was ecstatic, even though I knew there was still a long road ahead. The next few months were a blur. I threw myself into marketing, spending hours on social media, running Facebook ads, and trying to get influencers to talk about the app. At first, the downloads were slow, but I didn't let that discourage me. I knew that success wasn't going to come overnight. I made a lot of mistakes along the way. I misjudged how much money I needed to spend on marketing. I miscalculated how long it would take to build the app, and I didn't anticipate how difficult it would be to keep up with customer service. But every mistake was a lesson, and every failure was just another opportunity to get better. It wasn't until we hit a year of being live that things finally started to pick up. I had learned enough about SEO and social media to start driving organic traffic to the app. More people were signing up, and the feedback we were getting was positive. I listened to users, made improvements based on their suggestions, and slowly began to build a community around the app. I'll never forget the day we reached 10,000 users. It wasn't just a milestone, it was proof that all of my hard work was paying off. I was no longer just some guy with a crazy idea. I had built something real. Fast forward to today, and the app has grown to over 100,000 active users. We've expanded our services, partnered with gyms and health coaches, and even developed a premium version of the app that brings in steady revenue. I still work long hours, but now I do it for a purpose. I've built something that helps people live better, healthier lives, and that's incredibly rewarding. I know the road ahead will continue to be difficult, and I'll face new challenges I can't even imagine right now. But I've learned that persistence is everything. When you refuse to give up, when you keep improving and adapting, success will eventually follow. I started this journey with nothing but an idea and a broken laptop. Now, I'm building a company that makes a difference. I'm far from where I want to be, but I'm proud of how far I've come. I've learned that entrepreneurship is not about being lucky. It's about working harder than anyone else, learning from mistakes, and never losing sight of the end goal. If I can do it, anyone can. All you need is that one idea, the drive to make it happen, and the courage to keep going when things get tough. That's what entrepreneurship is all about. I was always the kind of person who believed that success was reserved for a select few. I grew up in a small town where most people worked the same 9 to 5 jobs, living in the same predictable cycle day after day. People rarely talked about ambition or chasing dreams, and if they did, it was often followed by a skeptical laugh. But, as someone who always dreamed bigger than what my surroundings suggested, I felt there was more to life than just following the script. I spent my childhood watching my parents struggle to make ends meet. My dad worked long hours as a mechanic, and my mom took on multiple part-time jobs just to keep us afloat. I often saw how hard they worked, but no matter how much they put in, it never seemed like they got ahead. It was disheartening for them, and for me too, as I knew I didn't want to live the same way. I wanted something different. I wanted freedom. When I graduated high school, I didn't have any fancy plans. College wasn't on my radar. Instead, I went straight to work in the local hardware store, thinking it would be a good way to make a stable income. I had no idea what I was doing, but I was determined to make it work. My dreams of becoming an entrepreneur were still there, tucked away in the back of my mind, but I had no roadmap to get started. I was just working and trying to keep my head above water. A few years in, I realized that if I wanted to break out of this cycle, I had to make a change. I knew I had a knack for understanding how things worked, and I began to teach myself about business. I spent every free moment reading books, listening to podcasts, and taking free online courses. I wasn't sure exactly what my big idea would be, but I knew that knowledge would be my ticket out. One day, I was at work and overheard a conversation between 2 regular customers who were talking about how difficult it was to find reliable contractors for small jobs around the house. They were frustrated because there were so many fly-by-night operators who didn't show up on time or did shoddy work. That conversation sparked something in me. I thought, what if I could build a business around providing reliable, high-quality home services? It seemed like a perfect fit. I could start small, and if it worked, it could grow into something bigger. With no savings and no investor backing, I didn't have a lot of options. But I had something better, a plan. I had learned about the power of bootstrapping, and I knew if I wanted to make this work, I would have to start small and build from the ground up. I knew that the key to success wasn't just about having the best product or service. It was about consistency and trust. I had worked hard to develop a reputation at the hardware store for being reliable and trustworthy, and I knew I could carry that same work ethic into a new business. I spent the next few months researching everything I could about the home service industry. I learned about how to hire subcontractors, how to manage schedules, how to price my services, and how to build a brand. I even learned how to design a basic website and create business cards, all on a shoestring budget. My first step was launching a small local business, focusing on minor repairs and odd jobs. I didn't have a fancy name, just a simple handyman services sign in the window of my old truck. But I made sure to give every customer my best effort, from the moment I arrived to the final handshake. At first, it was slow. I'd spend long days working on small jobs, sometimes making barely enough to cover the gas. But I kept at it, doing great work for my customers, and they began to spread the word. Slowly but surely, my reputation started to grow. I got a call one day from a woman who needed help fixing a leaky roof. It was a big job, and I wasn't sure if I was ready, but I said yes anyway. I knew if I could pull it off, it would solidify my business in the eyes of the community. I worked on that roof for hours, making sure every detail was perfect. When I finished, the woman was so impressed that she gave me a bonus and recommended me to all her friends. That one job turned out to be a turning point. From that point on, I started to get more calls for larger jobs, and I knew I needed to scale up. I hired a couple of reliable subcontractors to help with the bigger jobs and started focusing more on marketing and building my brand. I worked tirelessly to keep the business growing, and it wasn't easy. There were months where I didn't make much money at all, and there were days when I doubted if it was even worth it. But I kept reminding myself that this was a long-term game. I wasn't trying to get rich overnight. I was trying to build something sustainable. Over the next few years, the business began to grow. I moved from small home repairs to larger remodeling projects and renovations. I created a strong online presence, and word of mouth continued to drive much of my business. I was still working long hours, but I was starting to see the fruits of my labor. My brand became synonymous with quality and reliability, and that trust kept customers coming back. It wasn't until about 5 years in that I had my first big breakthrough. I secured a contract with a local real estate developer who needed a reliable team for multiple properties. This was the opportunity one had been waiting for. I had to scale up quickly, hire more employees, and manage larger projects. But it was the push that elevated my business to the next level. That contract opened doors to new partnerships, and soon I was working on projects that I never thought possible. My reputation as a trustworthy, high-quality service provider had paid off. I was no longer just a guy with a truck and a toolbox. I had a full-fledged business. I invested in better equipment, hired a full-time office staff, and started to focus on streamlining the business operations. Looking back, it's hard to believe how far I've come. From that small-town hardware store to now running a successful home service business. The journey has been nothing short of incredible. I've learned so much along the way: how to scale a business, how to handle setbacks, and how to balance growth with quality. But the most important thing I've learned is that success isn't about luck. It's about perseverance, trust, and a willingness to take risks. Today, I'm still running the business, but now I'm also helping others who are trying to make their own way. I mentor young entrepreneurs who are just starting out and share my story to inspire others who might feel like they don't have what it takes. I tell them that if a guy like me can build something from nothing, then anyone can do it. All it takes is the right mindset, a strong work ethic, and a belief that no dream is too big. And while the road hasn't been easy, I wouldn't trade it for anything. It's been the toughest, most rewarding thing I've ever done, and I'm proud of the journey. I'm proof that you don't have to have a perfect background or a ton of resources to build something successful. You just need the will to try and the determination to keep going, no matter how many obstacles you face. So here's my story. It all started about 5 years ago when I was living in a small town in Ohio. I was working a typical 9 to 5 job in a cubicle, doing something I didn't care much about. The hours were long, the pay wasn't great, and I felt stuck. I had dreams of running my own business, but I didn't know where to start, what to do, or how to break free from the cycle of working for someone else. I wasn't always like this. As a kid, I had big ideas and a ton of energy. I loved selling things, whether it was lemonade on the sidewalk or homemade bracelets at school. I was always trying to make a little extra money. But over the years, I'd fallen into the routine of adult life. You know, the one where you work, pay bills, repeat. It took a while for me to realize that I was letting my dreams slip away. But one day, something clicked. It started when I went on a trip to visit some family in California. One of my cousins, who was around my age, was talking about his online business. He was running a small digital marketing agency, helping companies with social media and SEO. He'd been doing it for about a year, and he was making more money than I ever imagined. He was working from home, setting his own hours, and traveling around. It was exactly the kind of lifestyle I wanted, but I had no idea how to start. At first, I was skeptical. I thought, sure, that's great for him, but I don't have any experience with marketing, and I don't know how to build a business. But my cousin sat me down and broke it down for me. He explained the basics of digital marketing and how he got his first clients. He even gave me some books to read and recommended a few online courses. The more I learned, the more I realized that I could do this too. It wasn't some exclusive club for people with fancy degrees or years of experience. It was something I could learn on my own, at my own pace. When I got back to Ohio, I felt energized. I started doing research on digital marketing, social media strategies, and SEO. I watched YouTube videos, read blogs, and enrolled in a couple of online courses. It was slow at first, and there were days when I felt overwhelmed by how much there was to learn. But I kept at it. I started practicing by offering free consultations to local businesses, restaurants, small shops, and anything else that would give me a chance. I didn't have much to offer, but I was determined to prove myself. At first, it was a grind. I sent cold emails to dozens of businesses and got maybe 1 or 2 responses. I had no portfolio to show, just a couple of half-baked strategies that I'd written down. But eventually, a small local restaurant agreed to give me a shot. They didn't have much of an online presence, and their social media pages were dead. I spent weeks creating content for them, posting regularly, and running targeted ads. Slowly but surely, they started seeing results. Their foot traffic increased, and they got more online orders. They were happy, and I was hooked. I knew this was what I wanted to do. After that first success, things started to snowball. I got a few more clients, mostly small businesses that were struggling to make an impact online. Every client was a new challenge, and I learned something new every time. It wasn't always easy. There were long nights, moments of self-doubt, and clients who weren't happy with my work. But I pushed through it, refining my skills and learning from my mistakes. Over time, I built a small but steady client base. Around this time, I made a big decision. I was going to quit my day job. It wasn't an easy decision, and I didn't take it lightly. I was making enough money from my side business to cover my bills, but I was still scared. What if I failed? What if I couldn't find enough clients? But deep down, I knew that I'd never be happy working for someone else. I had to take the leap. So I handed in my resignation and officially became a full-time entrepreneur. It felt surreal, but at the same time, it was the best decision I could have made. I was now in control of my own destiny. No more long commutes. No more sitting in a cubicle. I had the freedom to work on my terms, and I loved it. But even after making the leap, things weren't smooth sailing. There were still tough times, months when business slowed down, when I had to scramble to find new clients, and when I doubted myself. But I learned how to adapt. I started networking with other entrepreneurs, attending conferences, and learning from others in the industry. I realized that success wasn't just about working hard. It was about working smart and building relationships. As my business grew, I started to hire people to help with the workload. It was a huge step, and it took me a while to get comfortable with delegating tasks. But it was necessary. I couldn't do everything myself, and having a small team of people who were just as passionate as I was made a huge difference. We started offering more services like email marketing, content creation, and even web design. My agency was growing, and I felt like I was finally building something real. A couple of years in, we reached a major milestone. We landed a contract with a mid-sized company that needed help revamping their entire online presence. It was a huge opportunity, and I put everything I had into making it work. We redesigned their website, revamped their social media strategy, and ran targeted ad campaigns. The results were outstanding. Their sales increased by 30%, and they became one of our best clients. This success gave me the credibility I needed to attract even bigger clients. Now, 5 years later, my agency has grown beyond anything I could have imagined. We have a team of 12 people, and we work with clients from all over the country. I've learned so much along the way, from managing people to negotiating contracts to scaling a business. It's been a roller coaster, full of highs and lows, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. Looking back, I'm amazed at how far I've come. If someone had told me 5 years ago that I'd be running my own successful business, I would have laughed. But now, I'm proud of what I've built, and I'm excited for the future. The journey hasn't been easy, but it's been worth every minute. If you're thinking about starting your own business, take it from me. Start small, learn constantly, and never give up. The path isn't always clear, but if you keep pushing, you'll get where you want to go. I'll start by saying that I wasn't always the entrepreneur I am today. In fact, for a long time, I didn't even know what an entrepreneur was. I grew up in a small town in the Midwest, where everyone followed the same old routine. Go to school, graduate, get a stable job, work for 40 years, and then retire. That's what my parents did. That's what everyone in my town did. And that's what I thought was the only way to live life. But life had other plans for me. I was always good with my hands. I enjoyed tinkering with things, fixing stuff around the house, and building small projects. My dad used to say I had a knack for taking things apart and putting them back together, sometimes even better than before. But back then, I didn't see it as a career. It was just a hobby, and I thought I would always just work a regular job, maybe in a factory or a construction crew, and that would be enough. I never really thought much about the future beyond that. That all changed when I got my first real job after high school. I worked as a maintenance technician at a local factory, doing basic repairs and troubleshooting machines. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. At first, I thought it would be a good, stable job, just like everyone else around me. But after a year or two, I began to realize that I wasn't happy. I wasn't being challenged, and my skills were stagnating. I was just another cog in the machine, and I hated it. I started to notice the other people around me. There were the supervisors and managers, who seemed to have more control over their lives, more freedom. They didn't have to do the dirty work, and they seemed to enjoy the comfort of their office spaces and higher salaries. I started thinking, maybe that's where I need to be. Maybe I need to climb the ladder. So, I began working harder. I stayed late, learned everything I could about the machinery, and put in extra hours to become indispensable. Eventually, my hard work paid off, and I got a promotion to a supervisory position. The pay increase was nice, and I felt proud of myself for moving up the ranks. But the more I worked in this new role, the more I realized that it didn't satisfy me. The bureaucracy, the endless meetings, the never-ending corporate politics, it was all draining. I started to feel like I was back in the same rut, just at a different level. It was around this time that I came across an article on entrepreneurship. I don't even remember what it was specifically about, but it piqued my interest. The idea of being your own boss, of having the freedom to create something from the ground up, was intoxicating. I had never considered it before, but suddenly, the idea of running my own business seemed so appealing. I thought to myself, what if I could build something? What if I could create a company that didn't have to deal with all the red tape? That's when I decided to take the leap. I started small. I began a side hustle fixing and refurbishing old appliances. I'd go to garage sales and thrift stores, pick up old refrigerators, stoves, and washing machines, fix them up, and resell them. It wasn't much at first, just a way to make a little extra cash, but it was something I could do on the side while still working my full-time job. At first, I didn't make a lot of money, but I learned a ton about marketing, customer service, and the value of hard work. Slowly, I built up a small client base, and I started to feel the satisfaction of building something of my own. But as the months went by, I began to get frustrated. I was still working my full-time job, and while my side hustle was growing, it wasn't growing fast enough. I was spending more and more hours working on my business at night, and it was starting to take a toll on my personal life. I was exhausted all the time, and my relationships started to suffer. I knew something had to change. One evening, after a long day at work, I sat down and had a real conversation with myself. What do I really want? What am I willing to sacrifice to get it? The answer was simple. I wanted freedom. I wanted to be my own boss. I wanted to create something that could stand the test of time, not just another job that I would hate in a few years. So, I made a decision. I would quit my full-time job and go all in on my business. It was terrifying. I had a steady income, health insurance, and the comfort of knowing that if something went wrong, I could always go back to another factory job. But I knew deep down that if I didn't take the risk, I would regret it for the rest of my life. The first few months of working for myself were brutal. There were so many things I didn't know. I had no idea how to run a business properly. I didn't know how to manage my finances, deal with taxes, or market my products effectively. I spent hours reading books, watching YouTube tutorials, and making mistakes, lots of mistakes. But with each failure, I learned more. Slowly, I began to understand the ropes of entrepreneurship. I learned to budget properly, set realistic goals, and most importantly, how to find and keep customers. It wasn't all smooth sailing, though. I had months where I barely made any money. There were times when I doubted myself and wondered if I had made a huge mistake. But I kept pushing through. I had no other choice. My back was against the wall, and I wasn't going to let this dream slip away. Eventually, my persistence paid off. My business started to grow steadily. Word of mouth spread, and I began to gain a reputation for being reliable and affordable. I started hiring a few employees to help with the workload, and I was able to take on bigger projects. I expanded my services to include appliance repairs, and I even started offering warranty plans for the items I sold. Fast forward to today, and my business is thriving. I own a small company with 12 employees, and we've expanded into a new location. I've been able to hire a management team to handle the day-to-day operations, and I now spend my time focusing on growing the business even further. I still remember the days when I worked 16-hour shifts and barely scraped by, but now I'm in a position where I can take vacations, invest in other ventures, and even mentor others who are trying to follow the same path I did. Looking back, I never would have believed that this would be my life. I went from working a dead-end job in a factory to running my own successful business. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight, but every sleepless night, every failure, and every ounce of doubt I had along the way made me who I am today. My advice to anyone out there who's thinking about starting their own business is this: take the leap. The road will be tough, and there will be moments when you question your decisions. But if you're passionate and willing to learn, it's worth it. Don't let fear hold you back, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. Because in the end, it's not about how many times you fall, it's about how many times you get back up. And remember, the biggest risk is not taking one at all. This is the story of how I went from a struggling college dropout to running a successful e-commerce business, all because of one crazy idea I had when I was at rock bottom. It's a story of resilience, a bit of luck, and a lot of failures, but in the end, it turned out to be the best decision of my life. I'll start at the beginning. I was in my second year of college, studying marketing, when I realized that traditional education wasn't for me. I had always been someone who preferred hands-on learning. Lectures felt like a waste of time, and I found myself skipping more classes than attending them. I wasn't failing, but I wasn't exactly excelling either. It felt like I was just going through the motions. One night, during a particularly dismal exam prep session, I had an epiphany. I didn't need a degree to start a business. I was already learning more from side hustles and late-night YouTube tutorials than I was in class. The only thing holding me back was fear. Fear of failure, fear of wasting time, fear of disappointing my parents. But I knew deep down that I wasn't going to get anywhere in life following the traditional path. So, I made a decision that would change everything. I dropped out of college. At first, things were exciting. I had all this free time, and my mind was racing with ideas. I wanted to start an online business, something that could eventually replace a traditional job, something that would give me the freedom I craved. I didn't have any experience in running a business, but I had passion and a strong desire to make something work. I didn't come from money. My family was supportive, but they were skeptical about my decision to leave school. My parents thought I was making a huge mistake, and honestly, I did too at first. But I was determined. I spent the next few months learning everything I could about e-commerce, digital marketing, and product design. I watched tutorials on YouTube, read countless blog posts, and joined online forums to get advice. I even reached out to successful entrepreneurs, offering to work for free just to learn from them. A few took me up on the offer, and I learned more in those months than I had in my entire year of college. The first real breakthrough came when I decided to start my first product-based business. I had been scouring Alibaba for months, looking for a product to sell, and I finally found something that seemed like a winner: custom phone cases. It was a saturated market, but I saw an opportunity to differentiate myself with unique designs and a more personalized experience. The next step was setting up an online store. I used Shopify, which seemed like the easiest option for a beginner like me. It took me a few weeks to get everything up and running, but when I finally launched the store, I felt like a true entrepreneur. The website looked decent, and I had a small Instagram following thanks to some influencer partnerships I'd secured. I was pumped, but the first month was a disaster. I made zero sales. Not a single person bought a phone case. It was frustrating beyond belief. I spent hours tweaking my website, running ads, posting on social media, trying to get the word out, but nothing worked. I remember sitting in my tiny apartment, staring at my screen, wondering if I had just made the biggest mistake of my life. But I didn't give up. Instead of throwing in the towel, I took a step back and analyzed what went wrong. I started looking at my ads and the feedback from my social media followers. The problem was clear: my designs were not unique enough, and the marketing didn't stand out. Everyone else was doing the same thing. I had to be different. I went back to the drawing board. I hired a freelance graphic designer, and together we came up with a new line of phone cases featuring quirky, original designs that catered to niche markets: gamers, anime fans, minimalists, and people who just wanted something fun. I revamped the website to make it more user-friendly, focused on creating better content for social media, and tweaked my advertising strategy to target a more specific audience. When I relaunched, something clicked. Sales started trickling in, and by the end of the month, I had made a few $100s in profit. It wasn't a huge amount, but it was a sign that I was on the right path. I used that money to reinvest into the business, doubling down on Facebook and Instagram ads and working with more influencers. Slowly but surely, the business grew. Fast forward a few months, and I was making enough money to quit my part-time job and work on the business full-time. I had gone from zero sales to 6 figures in revenue in less than a year. The business wasn't without its challenges, though. The supply chain was a constant headache, and customer service was something I wasn't prepared for. But I learned quickly, and with every obstacle, I found a way to overcome it. Then, the real game changer happened. I had been using Facebook and Instagram ads to drive traffic, but one day, I heard about TikTok's potential for viral marketing. I didn't think much of it at first, but I decided to experiment. I started posting behind-the-scenes content, showing how the phone cases were designed, and even some fun, quirky videos related to the designs. To my surprise, one of my TikToks went viral. Within hours, my website crashed from the amount of traffic, and my sales skyrocketed. That was the moment I realized just how powerful social media could be for an e-commerce business. I started using TikTok as my main marketing channel, and it paid off in ways I never expected. At that point, the business really started to take off. I was able to scale up quickly, hire employees to help with operations, and even launch new product lines. I focused on building a brand that people connected with, not just a business that sold products. Customer loyalty became a huge part of my strategy, and I made sure to engage with my audience as much as possible. Today, my business is worth several $1,000,000, and I'm living the life I always dreamed of. I have a team of incredible people working with me, and we continue to grow. It hasn't been easy, but every challenge has made me stronger. Looking back, I'm glad I took the leap and trusted myself. If I hadn't dropped out of college, I wouldn't have had the freedom to pursue this crazy idea, and I wouldn't have had the courage to keep pushing through the tough times. The lesson I've learned from all of this is that success doesn't happen overnight. It's a combination of hard work, persistence, and a willingness to fail and learn from your mistakes. If you're sitting there thinking about starting your own business, but you're unsure, take it from me, don't wait for the perfect time. There will never be a perfect time. Just start, learn as you go, and don't be afraid to fail. If I can do it, so can you. And remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about being persistent. Keep going, even when it feels like nothing is working. The breakthrough is closer than you think. I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. Not because I thought it was glamorous or because I wanted to be rich, but because I wanted control over my life. It's always been a deeply personal drive. I grew up in a small town in Texas where everyone followed the same routine. Go to school, get good grades, go to college, get a degree, get a job, retire. There was this invisible line that everyone followed, and I never fit in. I could never accept the idea of spending 40 years in a cubicle answering to someone else. I was meant for something more, even if I wasn't sure exactly what that something was. When I finished high school, I went to college on a scholarship. I studied business, not because I was passionate about it, but because it seemed like the most logical route. My parents wanted me to become a lawyer or a doctor, something prestigious. I was just happy to get a scholarship and get out of my small town. I didn't have the money to attend college otherwise. It wasn't long into my studies, however, that I realized I wasn't actually interested in what I was learning. Accounting, finance, management, none of it excited me. But entrepreneurship did. There was something about the idea of building something from scratch that lit a fire in me. After graduation, I started working at a marketing agency. I learned a ton about digital marketing, but something about working for someone else didn't sit right with me. I was sitting in a cubicle, going through the motions, watching my dreams of starting my own business slip further and further away. After 2 years of what I can only describe as soul-crushing work, I had had enough. I saved up a bit of money, bought a laptop, and decided to quit my job and start my own business. My first venture wasn't glamorous. In fact, it was downright embarrassing. I had no idea what I was doing. I started a dropshipping business. For those who don't know, dropshipping is a retail fulfillment method where a store doesn't keep the products it sells in stock. Instead, when you sell a product, you buy the item from a third party and have it shipped directly to the customer. It sounded simple enough, so I thought it would be a great way to start without any upfront investment. I spent hours researching what products I should sell. I went through dozens of suppliers and spent way too much time perfecting my online store, which, in hindsight, was completely unnecessary. I launched my store and waited, and waited, and waited some more. For weeks, I heard nothing, not a single sale. My initial excitement quickly turned into panic. I started doubting everything. Maybe this wasn't for me. Maybe I was just another dreamer who couldn't hack it. But I wasn't ready to give up just yet. I scoured YouTube and read blog posts, trying to figure out what went wrong. I realized I hadn't properly marketed my store. I thought simply putting up a website would be enough. I quickly learned that driving traffic to a website was the real battle. So, I started running Facebook ads, but my first attempts were disastrous. I lost a lot of money on ads that didn't convert. I felt like I was drowning. I didn't know what I was doing, and I was starting to feel like I was wasting all my savings on something that wasn't going to work. But I stuck with it. Slowly but surely, I started figuring out the nuances of Facebook ads and online marketing. I adjusted my targeting, refined my messaging, and began to see some traction. I finally made my first sale. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep me going. Over the next few months, I fine-tuned my store, optimized my ads, and learned more about the products that actually sold. I even started seeing some consistency in sales. It wasn't enough to quit my day job yet, but it was a sign that I was heading in the right direction. A year in, I was making enough to live off of my dropshipping business. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough for me to quit my job and focus on it full-time. That's when things started to get real. I began outsourcing tasks that I wasn't good at, like customer service and order fulfillment, and hired freelancers to design better ads and improve my store's branding. I even began experimenting with other business models, like print-on-demand and affiliate marketing. But as the business grew, I encountered new problems. The competition in the dropshipping space was fierce, and margins were thin. It became clear that I needed to scale or get out. So, I decided to take a risk and invest in building my own brand. I stopped relying on third-party suppliers and began sourcing products directly from manufacturers. I worked on creating my own unique products that could stand out in a crowded market. This is when I learned the true meaning of entrepreneurship. Everything is a risk. Every step forward feels like a leap into the unknown. The road is messy, with countless failures, but also moments of triumph. For every decision that paid off, there were 2 that didn't. But each failure taught me something new. Each mistake made me better. It wasn't a smooth ride, but it was my ride. I finally understood what it meant to be an entrepreneur. Over the next few years, my business grew exponentially. I built a team, launched new products, and scaled up my operations. I moved into a bigger office and even took on investors who believed in my vision. The financial success was nice, but what truly mattered was the freedom. I controlled my own schedule, worked on projects I was passionate about, and could make decisions without answering to anyone else. However, the challenges didn't stop. I faced legal issues, supply chain disruptions, and constant pressure to innovate. There were times when I thought I had reached my breaking point, but each time, I found a way to push through. I started to embrace the idea that success in business isn't about avoiding failure, it's about persevering through it. Looking back, I realized that the hardest part wasn't starting the business, it was continuing when everything felt like it was falling apart. The self-doubt, the fear of failure, the uncertainty, it was all part of the process. I don't think anyone truly knows what they're doing when they start out. But that's the beauty of entrepreneurship. You get to figure it out as you go along. Today, I have a thriving e-commerce business. We've expanded into international markets, and I'm constantly looking for new ways to innovate and grow. I've made mistakes, lost money, and faced countless obstacles along the way, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. The journey has been worth it, and I've learned more than I ever thought possible. To anyone who's thinking about starting a business, do it. Don't wait for the perfect time, because it will never come. Start where you are, with what you have. You'll figure it out as you go. And most importantly, never, ever give up. I've always been someone who believed in hard work over talent and perseverance over shortcuts. But when I look back at my entrepreneurial journey, I realized that my success wasn't just about putting in the hours. It was about learning how to pivot, how to fail forward, and how to build a brand that truly connected with people. This is my story. It all started about 6 years ago. I was in my late 20s, stuck in a cubicle job at a marketing agency that I absolutely hated. The pay was decent, but the work felt draining, and the thought of spending another decade climbing a corporate ladder that I wasn't passionate about was terrifying. I had always wanted to start my own business, but like many people, I didn't know where to start. I'd read a ton of books, listened to podcasts, and watched every TED Talk I could find, but I was paralyzed by the fear of failure. I remember one night, sitting in my cramped apartment after work, scrolling through Instagram and seeing all these young entrepreneurs living their best lives, building businesses from the ground up. I felt this wave of envy mixed with inspiration. How are they doing it? Was it really possible to build something out of nothing? That's when I decided to take the leap. I didn't know what I was going to sell, but I knew I needed to start. The next morning, I walked into my boss's office, handed in my resignation, and told him I was going to start my own business. He looked at me like I was crazy, but in my heart, I knew it was the right decision. At first, I had no clear direction. I thought about launching an online store selling fashion accessories, or maybe digital marketing services, but nothing felt right. I had always loved fitness, so I finally decided to combine my passion for health with my business ambitions. I wanted to create a brand that helped people live healthier, more active lives. But there was a problem: everyone and their dog was already doing something similar. The market felt oversaturated, and I had no idea how to stand out. I spent the next few months doing market research, scouring the internet for gaps in the fitness industry. I wanted to offer something that wasn't just another supplement or trendy workout gear. It was during this time that I realized the biggest challenge most people faced wasn't a lack of motivation or knowledge, it was time. Everyone was so busy with their personal and professional lives that finding time for fitness seemed like an impossible task. That was my eureka moment. I decided to create a fitness app that focused on short, high-intensity workouts that could be done in 15 to 20 minutes, anywhere, without equipment. It was a concept I hadn't seen anywhere else in the market, and it felt like the perfect solution to the time-crunched lives of my target audience. I immediately got to work, sketching out ideas for the app, coming up with a name, and designing a brand identity. But there was a catch: I didn't know how to code. And building an app from scratch seemed like a monumental task, especially with the budget I had at the time, essentially nothing. I spent days Googling how to build an app without knowing how to code, and that's when I found platforms like Bubble and Adalo, which allowed non-techies to create apps through drag-and-drop interfaces. It was a game changer. Still, it wasn't a perfect solution. I had to spend a lot of time learning the ins and outs of these platforms, and my first prototype was far from user-friendly. I launched the beta version of my app to a small group of friends and family, asking for their feedback. It was rough around the edges, glitchy, slow, and not particularly intuitive, but the response was overwhelmingly positive. People loved the concept of quick workouts they could do at home, even if they didn't have time to go to the gym. I refined the app over the next few months, constantly improving it based on user feedback. But I knew the real challenge was coming: marketing. I didn't have much money for ads, and I knew I had to get creative. I started reaching out to micro-influencers in the fitness niche, offering them free access to the app in exchange for honest reviews. I also partnered with a few local gyms to offer exclusive discounts to their members. Slowly but surely, word started to spread. But the biggest breakthrough came when I landed a feature in a popular health and wellness blog. The traffic to my app exploded overnight. It wasn't an overnight success by any means, but that moment changed everything. I started to build a small but loyal user base, and I realized that the key to success wasn't just building a great product, it was building a community around it. I doubled down on my efforts to engage with users on social media, responding to comments, sharing fitness tips, and creating content that resonated with them. I wanted people to feel like they were part of something bigger, like they were working toward their fitness goals together. As the app grew, so did the challenges. My initial success was based on offering the app for free, but I soon realized that I needed to monetize it if I was going to keep it sustainable. I introduced a freemium model, where users could access basic workouts for free but had to pay for premium features like personalized coaching and advanced workout plans. To my surprise, people actually paid for it. The key was offering enough value in the premium version to justify the cost. That's when things really took off. With the extra revenue, I was able to hire a small team, mostly freelancers at first, to help with app development, marketing, and content creation. I also started to invest in ads, particularly on Facebook and Instagram, which were driving high conversions. By the end of the first year, I had over 10,000 paying subscribers, and the business was officially profitable. Looking back, the road was anything but smooth. There were moments when I felt like giving up, when I doubted my decision to leave my stable job. I remember feeling like an imposter when people asked me about my success. How could I call myself a legitimate entrepreneur when I didn't even know how to code? But through all the failures and setbacks, I learned that success isn't about having all the answers from the start. It's about taking action, adapting, and learning along the way. Now, 6 years later, my app has over 200,000 active users, and I've expanded into other areas of health and wellness, offering nutrition plans, virtual fitness classes, and even branded merchandise. I've been able to grow the business into something that supports a full-time team, and I'm finally in a position to give back, mentoring other aspiring entrepreneurs who are just getting started. If there's one thing I've learned throughout this entire journey, it's that entrepreneurship is a long game. You don't have to have everything figured out from day one, and it's okay to take small steps. What matters is that you keep moving forward, learning from your mistakes, and finding creative solutions to problems. The most successful entrepreneurs aren't necessarily the smartest or the most talented. They're the ones who refuse to give up. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. I've been working on my startup for 3 years now, and while I've seen some success, it's been nothing short of a roller coaster. My journey from an idea in my bedroom to a fully fledged company wasn't a smooth one. In fact, I hit rock bottom multiple times, but each time, I got back up, and here's why. It all started when I was 23. Fresh out of college with a degree in marketing and no real idea of what I wanted to do with my life, I found myself in the same place as a lot of my peers, overwhelmed, confused, and questioning every decision I had ever made. I had some corporate job offers, but nothing felt right. My heart wasn't in any of it. I had this crazy idea for a business that I couldn't stop thinking about. It wasn't an earth-shattering idea, but it was something I could see myself working on every day. I wanted to create an app that helped people with meal planning, grocery shopping, and healthy eating. As a young adult, I was constantly struggling to figure out what to eat. I wanted to build something that made it easier for people to plan meals around their dietary preferences, saving them time, money, and frustration. I spent months obsessing over the idea, learning everything I could about coding, app design, and the market. I didn't have a technical co-founder, which was probably the biggest mistake I made in the early stages. I tried to teach myself to code through online tutorials, but the reality is, I didn't know what I was doing. I would spend hours, days, and weeks trying to get a simple feature to work, only to end up frustrated and burned out. Despite that, I believed in my vision so much that I pushed forward. The first version of the app was embarrassing. I remember launching it to a small group of friends and family, and their feedback was brutally honest. The design was clunky, the functionality was barely there, and it didn't even load correctly half the time. But even though it was a disaster, something clicked inside me. I realized that this wasn't going to be easy, and I had two choices: give up and go back to a 9 to 5 job or keep pushing forward. I chose the latter. The first breakthrough came when I realized that I couldn't do everything on my own. I needed help. I reached out to a couple of developers who were willing to work for equity instead of a salary. They were just as passionate about the project as I was. We began rebuilding the app from scratch, focusing on usability and creating a smooth, intuitive experience for users. That was when things started to get interesting. We created a more polished prototype and began to test it with a wider audience. The feedback was still mixed, but it was encouraging. We had a couple of people who were really excited about what we were doing. I remember one user in particular, a mom of 3, telling me how our app helped her plan healthier meals for her family, saving her hours each week. She said it was the first app that truly felt useful to her. I can't tell you how motivating that feedback was. With this momentum, we applied to a few startup incubators, hoping to get some guidance and funding. We were rejected by most of them. Honestly, rejection after rejection was painful, but it only fueled my desire to succeed. We kept improving the app, learning from our mistakes, and iterating based on user feedback. Then, one day, we got an email from a well-known accelerator program. They loved our concept and wanted to bring us in for an interview. It felt like winning the lottery. The competition was fierce, and honestly, I had no idea what I was doing in that interview. I was nervous, my pitch wasn't perfect, and I could barely answer some of the technical questions they threw at me. But somehow, we made it through, and they offered us a spot in the program. That was a game changer. We gained access to mentors who had built multi-million-dollar companies, and they gave us invaluable advice. They pushed us to think bigger, challenge our assumptions, and, most importantly, to focus on our customers. They helped us refine our business model and suggested ways to scale faster. The next few months were a whirlwind. We revamped our app, launched it in a public beta, and watched as the user base started to grow. But it wasn't without its challenges. We had tech issues, server crashes, and even a marketing campaign that flopped horribly. At one point, our server couldn't handle the number of users, and we had to do an emergency shutdown. It felt like everything was falling apart. But that's when I realized the most important lesson in entrepreneurship. It's not about avoiding failure, it's about how you handle it. Each mistake was an opportunity to learn and improve. We slowly started gaining traction. We grew our user base from a couple hundred to thousands. We raised our first round of funding, which helped us hire more developers and designers. I hired a CTO who brought the technical expertise we desperately needed. We doubled down on user acquisition, improved our app's features, and created partnerships with grocery delivery services. Fast forward to today, and we're now a team of 30 people with a solid product and a user base that continues to grow. Our app has helped millions of people plan healthier meals, save time, and eat better. We've secured a second round of funding, and we're looking to expand internationally. The best part? We're profitable, which means we're no longer reliant on outside investment. But the road to this point has been full of highs and lows. There were days when I wanted to quit. There were nights I stayed up until 3 a.m. trying to fix bugs, only to feel like I was getting nowhere. There were times when I questioned whether it was all worth it. But every single time, I remembered why I started. I believed in the impact we could have on people's lives, and that kept me going. Looking back, I see how far we've come. I'm proud of what we've built, but I'm also aware that we still have a long way to go. Every day presents a new challenge, but I'm more confident now in my ability to handle whatever comes our way. Entrepreneurship isn't a straight line. It's messy, unpredictable, and filled with obstacles. But if you're willing to put in the work, learn from your mistakes, and keep pushing forward, you can make something incredible. If I could give any advice to aspiring entrepreneurs, it would be this: don't expect success to come easily. Embrace failure, because it's a part of the process. Build a great team, because you can't do it alone. And most importantly, remember why you're doing it. The journey may be tough, but if you stay focused, it will be worth it. It's 2012, and I'm standing in my cramped one-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn, staring at my laptop screen. I've just launched a product, my first attempt at building a business, and my heart is racing. I had spent the last 3 months pouring all my time, energy, and savings into this idea. I had no investors, no advisors, just a dream. And now it was out in the world. I had quit my corporate job earlier that year. The job wasn't bad, but it wasn't for me either. The mundane tasks, the endless meetings, the cubicles that felt like prison cells, all of it made me want to jump out of my skin. I'd always known that I didn't want to be tied down by a 9-to-5 job. I wanted freedom. I wanted to create something, to build something from the ground up. But I also wanted to be practical. I couldn't just quit my job without having something to fall back on. That's when I started thinking about starting my own business. At first, I had no clue what I was doing. I didn't have a background in business or entrepreneurship. I had a degree in marketing, but that didn't really teach me how to turn an idea into a successful venture. So, I did what anyone in my position would do. I Googled everything. I read blogs, watched YouTube tutorials, and followed successful entrepreneurs on social media. I was obsessed. After months of research, I finally decided on a product. It was a small, portable device designed to help people organize their home office space. Something simple, but practical. I spent hours designing the product, sourcing materials, and finding suppliers. I ordered small quantities of the product, worked on the website, and spent nights making sure everything was perfect. I remember the night I launched the website. I was terrified. What if nobody bought it? What if I wasted all my savings for nothing? That first day, I got a single order. 1. I felt a rush of excitement, but also fear. Was this a fluke? Was this person just bored and randomly clicked? I didn't know, but I decided to keep pushing. I reached out to bloggers and influencers, trying to get them to talk about my product. I ran ads on Facebook and Instagram. Slowly but surely, more and more people started ordering. It was small at first, just a handful of orders each day. But those few orders meant everything to me. They were proof that my idea had legs, that there was a market for what I was doing. By the end of the first month, I had made just enough to cover my costs and a little extra. I felt like I was on top of the world. I could see the potential. I could see the future where this small idea turned into something much bigger. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. As orders started to grow, so did the challenges. I had to deal with customer service issues, shipping delays, inventory problems, and, worst of all, returns. It was heartbreaking every time someone returned a product. Every return felt like a rejection, like I wasn't good enough. But instead of letting it defeat me, I used each problem as a learning experience. I learned to streamline the shipping process. I learned how to better communicate with my customers. I learned how to improve the product based on feedback. Fast forward a year. My little business is now generating consistent sales. Not enough to retire on, but enough to sustain me. I'm living paycheck to paycheck, but I'm also building something real. I still don't have any investors, and I still haven't taken a salary, but I'm getting by. I'm working out of my apartment, but I'm happy. The work is grueling, but the satisfaction of building something from the ground up is worth every sleepless night. I remember the first time I hired someone. It was a friend of a friend who had just graduated from college and was looking for a job. I didn't have the budget to hire anyone full-time, so I offered him part-time work. It felt surreal to have someone else helping me. I wasn't doing everything myself anymore. I started to realize that building a business wasn't just about creating a product. It was about building a team, creating systems, and learning how to delegate. It was a whole new skill set that I was starting to develop. But the real breakthrough came when I decided to invest in branding. Up until that point, I had been running my business on a shoestring budget. My website was functional, but it wasn't beautiful. My product packaging was simple and unremarkable. But when I decided to put money into branding, everything changed. I hired a designer to create a new logo, revamp the website, and redesign the packaging. It wasn't cheap, but it was the best decision I made. The new look made my product feel professional, polished, and desirable. Almost overnight, sales increased. By 2015, I was able to hire a small team and move out of my apartment. I rented a small office space in the city, and things were finally starting to feel real. I could pay myself a salary, and I was starting to see the fruits of my labor. But the challenges didn't go away. In fact, they only got bigger. As the business grew, so did the problems. Cash flow became a constant concern. Inventory management became a logistical nightmare. I had to hire more people, but that meant more payroll and more responsibility. The pressure was mounting, but I was determined to keep going. In 2017, we launched a new product line. This was a big gamble, but it paid off. The new products were a hit, and sales skyrocketed. I finally felt like I had made it. I could look back at the past 5 years and see how far I had come. But the truth is, I wasn't done. I wanted more. I wanted to build a brand that people loved, a company that could stand the test of time. By 2020, my business had expanded into a full-fledged company with multiple employees and a growing customer base. We had moved from a small office to a larger warehouse, and I was no longer worried about cash flow or inventory issues. We had a team of designers, marketers, and customer support specialists. We had investors, and we were finally able to scale. But it was a constant balancing act. I had to make tough decisions every day, and sometimes I felt like I was stretched too thin. But I had come so far, and I wasn't going to let anything stop me. Today, in 2025, my company is thriving. We're not the biggest player in the market, but we're a force to be reckoned with. I look back on the years of struggle, the sleepless nights, the failures, and the setbacks, and I realize that they were all part of the journey. Every mistake taught me something. Every obstacle made me stronger. And every success, no matter how small, felt like a victory. I never imagined this would be my life when I started out. Back then, I was just a guy with an idea and a laptop. But now, I'm the founder of a growing business, and I've built something I can be proud of. It hasn't been easy, but it's been worth every single moment. Looking back, I wouldn't change a thing. And if you're reading this, and you're thinking about starting your own business, here's my advice: do it. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't wait until you have all the answers. Just start. You'll learn as you go, and the journey will be worth it. The road won't always be smooth, but if you keep pushing forward, one step at a time, you'll get there. I started my journey as an entrepreneur in my mid-20s, fresh out of college with a degree in marketing and a modest savings account. I had big ideas, but no clear path. I knew that the 9-to-5 grind wasn't for me, but I wasn't sure what kind of business I wanted to run. The first few years were a blur of half-baked projects, failed side hustles, and learning the basics of business management. The first real business I launched was a custom t-shirt company. I had designed some cool graphic tees and thought they'd sell like hotcakes. I spent weeks learning about e-commerce platforms, social media marketing, and how to set up a website. I thought I was ready. The reality hit hard. I was terrible at managing the logistics, my designs weren't as unique as I thought, and I didn't have enough capital to drive any significant advertising. I ran out of money after 6 months and had to shut it down. But that failure wasn't a complete loss. I learned that passion isn't enough. You need operational efficiency in a market that actually wants what you're offering. And you need capital. So I pivoted, not to another product, but to a service-based business that I thought would be less risky. I started a digital marketing agency. It seemed like a safer bet because I already had experience in marketing and the overhead costs were low. I reached out to local businesses, offering to build websites and handle their social media in exchange for a flat fee. I started by working with restaurants and small shops in my area. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills. However, I hit another roadblock. I didn't know how to scale the business. I had no idea how to hire the right people, manage a team, or delegate tasks effectively. At first, I did everything myself: content creation, client communications, billing, the works. I was overwhelmed, burnt out, and on the verge of quitting. But then, I made one key decision that changed everything. I hired my first employee. That first hire, a freelance graphic designer, was a game changer. It freed up my time to focus on growing the business while she took over the design work. This allowed me to start networking more, building a client base, and even attending local business conferences to meet potential partners and clients. I also started investing more in my own education, taking courses in leadership, financial management, and business strategy. Slowly but surely, the business started to grow. After a year, I felt confident enough to hire another person, this time, a project manager to handle the day-to-day operations and client communication. This move helped the business run much more smoothly. I could focus on strategy while my team handled the details. We started taking on larger clients, and the revenue increased significantly. But scaling came with its own set of challenges. As we grew, so did the complexity of the work. We needed new software, better systems, and more refined processes. I realized that if I wanted to keep growing, I couldn't keep doing things the way I always had. I had to embrace automation, build stronger processes, and hire the right talent at every level. The next big turning point came when I decided to expand our services. We were primarily offering social media marketing and website design, but I noticed that our clients were also asking for more advanced services like SEO, pay-per-click ads, and email marketing. I had to quickly learn about these areas, either through self-study or hiring experts in those fields. This expansion allowed us to offer a full suite of digital marketing services, which attracted more high-paying clients. But with new services came more responsibility. We had to build out a new team, train people in specialized areas, and invest in the right technology. The business was no longer just a side hustle. It was now a full-fledged company with employees, contractors, and a growing client list. As the business continued to grow, so did my ambition. I knew that to really make a mark in the industry, I needed to innovate and set myself apart. That's when I came up with the idea for a subscription-based digital marketing model. Instead of offering one-off projects, we would offer ongoing monthly services at a fixed rate. The idea was to provide consistent value to clients while generating predictable, recurring revenue for the business. The subscription model took off faster than I expected. Clients loved the predictability of monthly payments, and we loved the steady cash flow. It was a win-win situation. But, as with everything, it came with its own set of challenges. The recurring nature of the work meant we had to keep delivering at a high level every month, which put pressure on the team. We had to invest in better project management tools and create a more streamlined process for onboarding new clients and managing ongoing projects. At this point, the business had grown to a size where I could finally step back from the day-to-day operations. I was able to bring in a COO who helped streamline our processes even further. I could focus more on big-picture strategy, exploring new business opportunities, and expanding our brand into new markets. Today, we have a fully remote team spread across 3 continents, servicing clients in over 15 countries. We've moved into new verticals like video marketing and AI-driven analytics, and our client list includes some big names in tech and finance. We're constantly evolving, but the journey from a small digital marketing agency to a global company has been nothing short of insane. Looking back, I can honestly say that every failure, every moment of doubt, every sleepless night was worth it. The key to success wasn't some grand idea. It was a willingness to adapt, learn, and fail forward. And most importantly, it was about taking the leap. Every day is a new challenge, but that's what keeps me going. The thrill of building something from the ground up, the chance to solve problems, and the ability to impact people's lives through our work is what makes it all worth it. If you're reading this and thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple: get started. Don't wait for the perfect idea or the perfect moment. You'll never have everything figured out, and you'll learn more by doing than you ever will by planning. And when you fail, and you will fail, don't see it as the end. See it as the beginning of your next lesson. I started my journey in the world of entrepreneurship when I was 22 years old, fresh out of college with a degree in marketing. To say I was ambitious would be an understatement. I wasn't the kid who dreamed of being a doctor or lawyer. I wanted to build something from scratch, create something that could make a real difference in the world. The only problem? I had no idea where to start. It wasn't that I didn't have ideas. I had tons of them. Some were practical, others were wild, and some were just plain ridiculous. But despite all the ideas running through my head, I struggled to take action. I knew that starting a business would be a huge commitment, and the fear of failure was paralyzing. It felt like there were too many things I didn't know. How to raise capital, how to find customers, how to hire the right people. But I also knew that if I didn't start, I would always regret it. The turning point came when I read a quote by Steve Jobs. Asterisk, the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. Asterisk, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I didn't need to have everything figured out. I just needed to start. So, I decided to dive in head first. I started small. I took a part-time job at a local coffee shop to make ends meet while I worked on my idea. I was living in a small apartment, eating ramen for dinner, and spending every free moment reading business books, watching YouTube tutorials, and talking to anyone who would listen about my idea. At first, I thought I would create an app. At the time, everything seemed to be about tech startups and apps that would revolutionize industries. But after months of brainstorming, I realized that my skills and passion weren't aligned with building an app. I didn't know how to code, and while I had a background in marketing, I had no idea how to create a tech product. I took a step back and reflected on what I really cared about. It wasn't about jumping on the latest trend. It was about solving problems and providing value. That's when I realized I could use my marketing background to help small businesses, which seemed to be an underserved market. I decided to create a digital marketing agency. My goal was simple: help small businesses grow through targeted, cost-effective marketing strategies. I knew that many small business owners weren't able to afford big agencies or had no idea how to promote their products online. I figured I could bridge that gap by offering affordable services that would get results. The next challenge was figuring out how to get my first clients. I didn't have a portfolio, didn't have testimonials, and didn't have any social proof. But I wasn't about to give up. I started by reaching out to local businesses in my area, offering them a free consultation in exchange for a case study. I wasn't asking for money, just the opportunity to prove that I could help them. The first business I reached out to was a small bakery. They were struggling to attract customers, and their social media presence was practically non-existent. I offered to manage their Instagram and Facebook accounts for free for a month. In exchange, they agreed to let me showcase the results in a case study on my website. At first, I didn't know if it would work. I spent hours learning the ins and outs of social media marketing, researching what kind of content worked, and experimenting with different strategies. Slowly but surely, we started to see results. The bakery's follower count grew, engagement skyrocketed, and, most importantly, they started getting more foot traffic. They were thrilled with the results and decided to hire me on a paid basis after the trial period. That was my first win. It felt like a small victory, but it gave me the confidence to push forward. With that case study, I was able to land a few more clients, and over the next few months, my business started to gain traction. However, growing a business wasn't as easy as I had hoped. The next hurdle came when I realized that I couldn't scale my agency alone. At first, it was just me, working late nights, doing everything from client outreach to content creation. But I quickly became overwhelmed. I realized I needed to hire help. The problem was, I didn't have enough revenue to hire full-time employees. So, I started outsourcing some tasks to freelancers. Finding reliable freelancers wasn't easy, though. I had a few bad experiences with people who didn't deliver on time or didn't understand my vision for the business. But I also met some incredible freelancers who became key parts of my team. Slowly, my business grew, and I started to take on bigger clients. My reputation in the local community was starting to spread, and my client list was growing. One of the biggest lessons I learned during this phase was the importance of building relationships with clients. I made it a point to always over-deliver and exceed expectations. I didn't want to just be another vendor to them. I wanted to be a trusted partner in their success. And it paid off. Many of my early clients became repeat customers, and they referred me to others in their networks. By year 2, I had a small but steady stream of clients and was able to hire a couple of full-time employees. We were focused on helping businesses with everything from social media management to content marketing and SEO. But just when I thought I had it all figured out, the next challenge hit: competition. As my agency grew, I noticed more and more people jumping into the digital marketing space. Some were seasoned pros, while others were just starting out like I had. The market was becoming saturated, and it was harder to stand out. I knew I had to differentiate myself if I wanted to stay ahead of the curve. That's when I decided to niche down. Instead of trying to be everything to everyone, I focused on helping e-commerce businesses. I had always been fascinated by e-commerce, and I saw an opportunity to specialize in helping online stores grow. By focusing on one niche, I was able to tailor my services and become an expert in that area. The decision to niche down was a game changer. It allowed me to build a reputation as an e-commerce marketing expert, and my business grew exponentially. I was able to charge higher fees because I was offering specialized knowledge, and I was attracting better clients who were willing to invest in their growth. Fast forward to today, and my agency is thriving. We have a team of 12 employees, and we work with clients from all over the world. We're no longer a small operation, and we're constantly looking for new ways to innovate and improve our services. But even though I've achieved a level of success, I still remember those early days, the sleepless nights, the uncertainty, the constant hustle. Entrepreneurship isn't easy, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. It's been one of the most challenging, rewarding, and fulfilling experiences of my life. Looking back, the biggest lesson I've learned is that success doesn't come overnight. It's the result of consistent effort, learning from mistakes, and never giving up. If you're thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple: take that first step. You don't have to have everything figured out. You just have to start, learn along the way, and keep going. The journey will be tough, but it's worth it. It was the summer of 2017, and I had just turned 26. I was working a 9-to-5 job as a marketing manager at a well-known tech company. I had the stability, the salary, and the benefits that most people my age dreamed of. On paper, I was living the dream, but every day felt like a drag. I wasn't challenged. I wasn't growing. And most importantly, I wasn't passionate about the work I was doing. I had always been interested in fashion and design. It wasn't just about clothing. It was about self-expression. But despite having a strong urge to pursue a career in the fashion industry, I never had the courage to step out of my comfort zone. I convinced myself that it wasn't practical. I didn't have the necessary connections, resources, or even the skills, or so I thought. But something in me had finally snapped. One night, after a particularly frustrating day at work, I started researching what it would take to start a fashion brand. I felt this strange mix of excitement and fear. I couldn't afford to quit my job yet. I still had student loans, rent, and a car payment. So, I decided to start small. I wanted to create a line of custom graphic tees that would speak to people like me, young professionals trying to balance their creative passions with the grind of corporate life. I knew I had to find a way to do this on the side without risking my financial stability. So, I put together a rough business plan in the middle of the night, using nothing but Google Docs and my own brain. It was ugly, but it was a start. The first step was to figure out how to design the shirts. I wasn't a graphic designer, but I knew how to use basic design tools like Photoshop. So, I spent a few sleepless nights learning everything I could about shirt designs, typography, and color theory. I watched tutorials on YouTube, read articles on design blogs, and even enrolled in a few online courses. Every free moment I had after work, I was practicing my designs. Once I felt comfortable with the designs, I started researching suppliers. I didn't have the budget for mass production, so I looked for print-on-demand services. This way, I could avoid investing a large sum of money up front and instead only produce shirts when customers ordered them. It felt like the perfect solution for someone who was just starting out. I spent hours comparing different platforms, reading reviews, and testing out sample orders to ensure the quality was up to par. Eventually, I settled on a service that seemed like a good fit for my brand's aesthetic. Now, I needed a place to sell the shirts. I created a website using a basic e-commerce platform. I spent more time than I care to admit choosing a name for the brand, designing the logo, and writing product descriptions. The process was slow, but it felt like progress. I didn't have much of a social media following, but I knew that Instagram was a key platform for fashion brands. So, I started posting content, behind-the-scenes looks at my design process, quotes that resonated with my target audience, and photos of my first shirt samples. At first, nothing happened. I'd get the occasional like, a comment here and there, but no sales. It was frustrating. My friends were supportive, but they didn't quite understand why I was putting in so much effort for something that seemed so small. A few months passed, and I was starting to doubt whether I should keep going. But then, something changed. One day, I received a message from an influencer I had been following on Instagram. She had seen one of my posts and was interested in doing a collaboration. I couldn't believe it. I had less than 500 followers, and here was someone with a following of 50K interested in working with me. I took the chance and sent her a few shirts. In return, she posted a picture wearing one of my designs, and just like that, things started to pick up. The first few sales trickled in, and I could feel a surge of excitement. It wasn't much, but it was something. The influencer's post brought in more followers, which led to more sales. I started gaining traction, and I knew I couldn't stop now. As the months passed, my brand slowly grew. I kept my day job, working on the business late at night and on weekends. I started reaching out to more influencers, building my brand's presence on social media, and refining my designs. I also began experimenting with paid ads, targeting audiences who would resonate with my products. Some ads worked better than others, but I learned from every campaign. I kept testing, adjusting, and improving my strategy. By 2018, I was making enough money to pay for my rent and living expenses. I had reached a point where I felt confident that I could quit my job and go full-time with my brand. But that decision wasn't easy. The idea of leaving a steady paycheck behind and jumping into the unknown was terrifying. But I had worked hard, and I had come to believe in my brand. So, after a lot of careful thought, I handed in my resignation letter. In the first few months of being a full-time entrepreneur, things were exciting, but also overwhelming. Suddenly, I was responsible for everything from customer service and inventory management to marketing and finances. The hours were long, and the pressure was real. But I loved it. Every challenge felt like an opportunity to learn, and I threw myself into it with everything I had. As my brand grew, I began diversifying my product offerings. I expanded beyond graphic tees to include hoodies, hats, and accessories. I also started creating limited edition drops, which created a sense of urgency among my customers. One of the things that set my brand apart was the sense of community I built around it. My customers weren't just buying clothes, they were buying into a lifestyle. I posted about my journey, the highs and lows, and shared my personal story. The more authentic I was, the more connected my audience felt. By 2020, my brand had grown beyond what I could have ever imagined. I was shipping orders worldwide, and I had a small but loyal team helping me manage the day-to-day operations. I had gone from a marketing manager in a corporate job to the founder of a thriving fashion brand. And yet, the most rewarding part of the journey was seeing the impact I was making on others. I received messages from customers telling me how much my designs resonated with them and how they felt empowered by wearing my shirts. That was when I realized that I wasn't just selling clothes, I was creating a movement. Looking back, I often wonder what would have happened if I hadn't taken that leap. I was terrified of failure, but I didn't let it stop me. Starting my own business was the hardest, most rewarding thing I've ever done. It wasn't easy, and it still isn't, but every day feels like I'm doing what I was meant to do. The entrepreneurial journey is full of ups and downs, but if there's one thing I've learned, it's that if you don't take the first step, you'll never know what could have been. So, if you're thinking about starting your own business or making a change in your life, my advice is simple: take the leap. It might be scary, it might be uncertain, but it could also be the best decision you ever make. It was for me. It was a crisp autumn morning when I made the decision that would change my life forever. I had just turned 30, and despite what I had convinced myself for years, I wasn't happy with my career. I was sitting in my cubicle, staring at my computer screen, typing away mindlessly at reports that were as uninspiring as they were endless. The fluorescent lights above flickered in a rhythm that matched my discontent. I had always told myself that I was lucky to have a stable job with decent pay, but deep down, I knew I was settling for something that didn't spark joy in me. I wasn't doing what I was meant to do. I had always dreamed of starting my own business, but I never had the guts to take the leap. I thought about it constantly. What would it take to actually go from someday to today? Every year, I would promise myself that next year would be the one where I took the risk, but next year never came. And now, on this particular morning, I had reached my breaking point. The thought of spending another year, another decade, in this soul-crushing cycle seemed unbearable. I knew it was time to make a change, but I didn't know how. I had no prior experience in business, no fancy degrees, no rich uncle to bankroll me. What I did have was a passion for something that had always been a side hustle: handmade leather goods. I had learned to make wallets, belts, and bags in my spare time, and over the years, I had perfected my craft. It wasn't just a hobby for me, it was a form of therapy. The act of stitching leather, of carefully crafting each piece by hand, was something I felt truly connected to. But until then, it had always been something I did for fun, not as a serious business. I started small. That day, I walked out of my cubicle for the last time and took a deep breath. I had no idea what I was doing, but I knew I couldn't stay in that job another minute. I began researching how to start a business. The first challenge? Learning about e-commerce. I had no experience selling products online, and the idea of launching an online store felt intimidating. I scoured blogs, watched YouTube tutorials, and spent hours reading about everything from website design to digital marketing. I set a goal. Within 3 months, I would have an online store up and running. 3 months seemed like a reasonable timeline, but it wasn't long before I realized that this was going to be much harder than I thought. My first challenge came when I tried to set up my website. I had no idea what I was doing. I spent weeks trying to build a website from scratch using a platform I didn't understand. Every time I thought I had figured something out, another problem would pop up. It was frustrating and time-consuming, but I wasn't ready to give up yet. Around the same time, I started thinking about how to market my products. I had no budget for advertising, so I had to be creative. I decided to focus on building a brand around my passion for quality craftsmanship. I wanted to make leather goods that people could appreciate for their durability and attention to detail. I started sharing my process on social media, posting photos and videos of me working in my small studio. It wasn't perfect, but people seemed to connect with the authenticity of it. They liked the idea of supporting a small, independent maker. Slowly, word started to spread. A few weeks after launching my website, I made my first sale. I remember staring at the notification in disbelief. I had sold a wallet to someone I didn't know, and I was ecstatic. That one sale was enough to validate my idea and give me the confidence to keep going. It felt like a small victory, but it was a crucial one. I knew I wasn't just dreaming anymore. I was building something real. But then, the hard work began. The next few months were a blur of 16-hour workdays, balancing the business with my personal life, and constantly refining my products. I had to learn everything from scratch. I learned about customer service, inventory management, and how to handle returns and complaints. I had to make decisions on the fly, often with little to no experience, and sometimes it felt like I was flying blind. There were days when I wondered if I had made a huge mistake. But every time I felt overwhelmed, I reminded myself of why I was doing this. I had no interest in going back to my corporate job. This was my chance to build something of my own, to finally take control of my future. The turning point came when I decided to invest in paid advertising. It was a huge risk. I didn't have a lot of money, and spending on ads felt like a gamble. But I was starting to see steady growth, and I needed a way to reach more people. I carefully targeted my ads to people who had shown interest in handmade products, sustainable fashion, and quality craftsmanship. The results were immediate. Sales started to pick up, and I could see a clear return on my investment. More importantly, I was starting to get repeat customers, which was the best indicator that I was offering something people truly valued. It wasn't just about the products anymore. I had built a brand that represented quality, authenticity, and passion. I began to get messages from customers telling me how much they loved my work and how excited they were to support a small business. It was surreal, and it fueled my determination even more. As my business continued to grow, I made the decision to quit my full-time job. I didn't have a safety net, and there were still risks, but it felt like the right time. I was finally ready to take the plunge. The first few months of full-time entrepreneurship were terrifying, but they were also exhilarating. I spent my days in my workshop, creating new designs, fulfilling orders, and constantly looking for ways to improve. The pressure was higher, but the rewards were worth it. Fast forward 2 years, and my business was thriving. I had expanded my product line, hired a small team to help with production, and even moved into a larger workshop. I was finally living the life I had always dreamed of. But the journey wasn't easy, and it wasn't always pretty. There were moments of doubt, moments where I wanted to quit, and moments where I questioned if I was good enough. But I kept pushing forward because I believed in my craft, and I believed in myself. Looking back, I'm amazed at how far I've come. What started as a small side project has turned into a thriving business that I'm incredibly proud of. It hasn't been without its challenges, but every obstacle I've faced has taught me something valuable. I've learned that success doesn't happen overnight, and that perseverance is key. Most importantly, I've learned that the only way to truly succeed is to take that first step, even when you're unsure of what lies ahead. If you want to build something meaningful, you have to be willing to take risks, to fail, and to keep going despite the setbacks. I'm not saying that entrepreneurship is easy. It's one of the hardest things I've ever done. But for me, it's been worth every ounce of effort. And if you're reading this and wondering if you should take the leap, my advice is simple: do it. You'll never know what you're capable of unless you try. It was the summer of 2015 when I decided to take the plunge and start my own business. I had been working in a corporate job for the past 5 years, living the typical 9-to-5 grind. On the surface, everything looked fine: a steady paycheck, a decent title, and enough vacation days to look forward to. But inside, I felt like I was suffocating. I had always dreamed of being my own boss, but I'd kept telling myself that the timing wasn't right. Until one day, I realized that there was never going to be a perfect time. So, I quit my job. I had no idea what I was doing. Sure, I had worked for a tech company and knew a thing or two about apps and software development, but building my own startup was a completely different beast. I knew I had to start small, so I didn't take out any loans or pitch for venture capital. I was determined to make it work without relying on anyone else's money. I sold my car, moved into a cheaper apartment, and started using every spare dollar to fund my business. I didn't even know where to begin. I spent countless nights just Googling how to write a business plan. It was overwhelming. I had a rough idea of the type of product I wanted to create. My app would be something that combined personal finance tracking with budget management, something that didn't just keep track of expenses but actively helped users make better financial decisions. But I had no technical expertise when it came to coding, and I definitely didn't have the cash to hire a developer. So, I started learning how to code. In the evenings, after my part-time job at a local cafe to keep the lights on, I'd watch tutorials on YouTube, follow coding blogs, and slowly, I began to piece things together. The first line of code I wrote was clunky and inefficient, but it was mine. I remember feeling a small surge of pride, but then it hit me. I had no idea what I was doing. The first few months were an absolute struggle. I was juggling multiple jobs, learning to code, and constantly battling self-doubt. I'd spend hours on the app, and then stare at my laptop, convinced that no one would ever want to use it. It was hard to see any progress at first. There were days when I thought I was just wasting my time. I remember reaching out to a few friends and asking them to test the prototype. They were supportive, but I could tell that they weren't genuinely impressed. It was hard not to feel like an imposter. But slowly, things started to click. I learned more about what my users wanted, and I tweaked the app accordingly. I added features like goal tracking, saving recommendations, and spinning categories. One day, about 6 months into the project, I showed the app to my older brother. He was a finance expert, and he didn't sugarcoat things. He told me that the app had potential, but it lacked something crucial. It wasn't personal enough. It was just a generic app with a bunch of features thrown together. There was no real sense of connection to the user. That feedback changed everything. I realized that I needed to make my app more user-centric, more intuitive, and less about features and more about people. I went back to the drawing board and spent the next few months refining the interface, rethinking the user experience, and integrating personalized financial advice based on their spending habits. It wasn't easy, and there were plenty of moments when I wanted to quit, but I kept pushing through. In 2017, after 2 years of grinding, the app was ready for launch. I had spent every penny I had on marketing, even running ads on social media, though I was pretty sure they wouldn't work. I felt the anxiety building up to the day we went live. What if no one downloaded it? What if no one cared? I had already invested so much time and money, and the fear of failure was consuming me. But then something amazing happened. Within the first 24 hours of launch, I saw downloads pour in. People were actually using the app. They were leaving reviews. They were telling their friends about it. It wasn't massive, but it was a start. Over the next few weeks, I kept checking the app's download stats obsessively, like a proud parent watching their child take their first steps. The feedback was invaluable, and I kept iterating on the app based on what users liked and didn't like. There was one user who suggested a feature that let them see all their bank accounts in one place. I thought it was a brilliant idea, so I worked on implementing it. By 2018, the app was gaining more traction. We had over 50,000 users, and I could finally afford to hire a small team to help with marketing, customer service, and further development. It felt surreal. I could see the light at the end of the tunnel. But even though things were going better than I ever expected, the challenges didn't stop. The biggest hurdle we faced was scalability. As the user base grew, the servers started crashing. At one point, our app was down for almost 12 hours due to a technical issue. I was freaking out. That was the moment when I realized that I couldn't do it all myself anymore. I had to bring in people who were experts in scaling apps. We hired a CTO, a couple of engineers, and expanded our team. The learning curve was steep. I was suddenly managing people, which was a whole new ballgame. I had to figure out how to delegate effectively, communicate my vision, and inspire my team to keep pushing forward. The next few years were a blur of constant iteration and improvement. We introduced new features like bill reminders, subscription management, and even an AI-powered budgeting assistant. But I'll admit that the more success we had, the more difficult it became to manage the business. We were constantly refining the product, and it was hard to keep up with the ever-changing landscape of mobile apps. In 2021, after 6 years of blood, sweat, and tears, we were acquired by a large fintech company. The deal was everything I'd worked for, but it was also bittersweet. I wasn't the scrappy entrepreneur anymore. The company that I had built from the ground up was now part of something much larger. But I had accomplished what I set out to do, create a product that people actually loved and that changed their financial lives for the better. I'm still working in the fintech industry today, but now I'm able to help other entrepreneurs in the same position I was in. I mentor young founders, and I always tell them the same thing. The journey is never linear. There will be moments of doubt, fear, and frustration, but if you keep pushing through and remain adaptable, you can achieve your goals. The road may be long, and it might seem like there's no light at the end of the tunnel, but eventually, you'll see the payoff. It wasn't easy. It took everything I had, but it was worth it. Every failure, every lesson, and every late night spent working was worth it. Today, I look back and feel a sense of pride and accomplishment, but I also know that I'm just getting started. I always believed that the key to entrepreneurship was just having a good idea and executing it well. I thought it was a straightforward equation. Idea plus action equals success. Simple enough, right? Well, I've learned the hard way that it's not quite that easy. In fact, looking back, it feels like every single mistake I made was a lesson that eventually led me to where I am now, owning a business that's doing well, but more importantly, having the confidence to know I can build something from scratch and grow it. But that journey was far from smooth. It all started in my early 20s when I thought I had it all figured out. I was fresh out of college, had a degree in marketing, and a handful of friends who had already jumped into the entrepreneurial pool. I was inspired, and the idea of running my own business felt like a calling. But what business? Well, that's where my journey truly began, and where I made the first big mistake. I started with the wrong business. I got into the idea of dropshipping. It seemed like an easy way to make money. Set up an online store, find suppliers, and market the products. I could work from home, set my own hours, and avoid the soul-crushing grind of a 9-to-5 job. Sounds perfect, right? Well, it wasn't. At first, things seemed to go well. I had a few successful months where I made some decent sales. But the market was saturated, and finding unique products was getting harder. I was competing against thousands of other people who were selling the same things, and after a while, the sales started to slow down. What I didn't realize then was that a successful business isn't just about making a few sales. It's about building a brand, creating customer loyalty, and providing value that no one else can. With dropshipping, I wasn't offering any of that. I was just another middleman. And even worse, I wasn't prepared for the financial toll. The advertising costs were rising, and I was still relying on low-margin products. The reality hit hard when I looked at my bank account and realized I wasn't making money. I was losing it. But I didn't give up immediately. Instead, I made the mistake of doubling down. I thought, if I just work harder, spend more on ads, and refine my marketing strategy, this will work. I ended up sinking more money into my business. I started testing different products, improving my website, even trying influencer marketing. Every time I thought I was making progress, something new came up to derail me. Customer complaints, suppliers failing to deliver on time, and rising advertising costs. It was one setback after another. Eventually, the inevitable happened. I had to shut down the dropshipping business. It was a painful experience. I had invested months of time, money, and energy, and ended up with very little to show for it. For a while, I questioned my abilities as an entrepreneur. I thought I was just one of those people who was destined to fail. But then something happened that changed my perspective. I met a mentor, a small business owner who had been running a successful local coffee shop for over 15 years. He wasn't flashy or anything. He didn't have a huge social media following or a fancy website. But he had something I lacked, a deep understanding of his customers and the value he provided. He told me that the key to any business is not just finding a profitable idea, but finding a way to offer value consistently. I realized then that I hadn't been focused on value. I'd been focused on trends, quick profits, and chasing the next big thing. That's when I pivoted. I decided to focus on something I knew well, something I could actually be passionate about. I loved fitness, and I loved helping people improve their health. I had a ton of experience working out, and I had spent years reading up on nutrition, training techniques, and mental strategies. So, I thought, why not start an online fitness coaching business? This time, I did things differently. I didn't dive into it without research. I spent months studying the market, talking to potential customers, and figuring out what people actually needed. I realized that while there were a ton of fitness coaches out there, most of them lacked a personalized approach. Everyone was selling the same cookie-cutter workout programs, and it wasn't resonating with people who needed more tailored advice. That's where I saw an opportunity. I launched a small online fitness coaching service, offering custom workout plans and nutrition advice. But rather than just selling a generic program, I built a personalized experience for each client. I made it clear that I wasn't just selling a program. I was offering a partnership to help people achieve their health and fitness goals. I used social media to document my own fitness journey, share tips, and show potential clients that I wasn't just another person trying to sell them something. I was genuinely invested in their success. This time, the results were different. Slowly, but surely, I began to build a client base. The business was small at first, but I was more focused on providing value than I was on making a profit. I focused on the people, and the money came later. I started getting great feedback from clients who were seeing real results, and their testimonials helped me attract more people. Over the course of the next year, I scaled my business from a one-person operation to hiring a small team to help manage clients and create new programs. Looking back, there were still mistakes along the way. I made bad hires, overspent on advertising, and sometimes felt overwhelmed by the responsibilities of running a business. But each mistake was an opportunity to learn and improve. I had learned to take failure in stride, not as a reflection of my abilities, but as a stepping stone to success. In fact, the dropshipping failure was one of the best things that ever happened to me. It forced me to reevaluate my approach to business and taught me the importance of offering genuine value to customers. Today, my fitness coaching business is thriving. I've expanded into new markets, created digital products, and launched a successful YouTube channel. The business isn't perfect, but it's mine, and I'm proud of what I've built. I've learned that entrepreneurship isn't about finding a shortcut to success. It's about perseverance, learning from failure, and continuously improving. If there's one piece of advice I can give to aspiring entrepreneurs, it's this: you will fail, and that's okay. Don't let it define you. Use it as a lesson. Don't get caught up in the quick wins or the latest trends. Focus on providing real value, and success will follow. I've learned that the hard way, but now that I've learned it, I'll never forget it. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.